Who should be the next Kansas Attorney General?
I'm doing this because so many Kansans have asked me to consider running for this office at this time in history.
We have to be able and in a position to push back against the Biden administration and their overreach.
So we need the conservative Republican who has the best opportunity to win, and that is me.
Ahead of the August primary election, the Republican candidates square off, live from the Doubletree Hotel in Overland Park. The Kansas Attorney General's debate is presented by the Johnson County Bar Association. 1,400 attorney members serving the community since 1938. And now, here's your debate moderator from Kansas City PBS, Nick Haynes.
Has there ever been a time when our attorney generals across the country have been more in the news? Have you noticed in Kansas and Missouri, our attorney generals have been right at the heart of every single hot-button issue dividing America right now, from abortion to gun rights, everything from mask mandates to transgender athletes in girls' sports. It's a powerful position, and the stakes are really high. And you, this year, have a chance to decide who should be in this office. Step one begins this hour as we present to you the Republican candidates in Kansas who want that job. Kris Kobach was twice elected Kansas Secretary of State and is a former constitutional law professor at UMKC. He lives near Lecompton. Tony Mattivi is a former assistant U.S. attorney and federal prosecutor. He lives in Topeka. And Kellie Warren is a Kansas state senator who serves as chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. She's an attorney in private practice. She lives in Leawood. Not everybody knows all about you, regardless of your ads. Consumer advice experts say that much like an accountant or contractor, you should approach choosing an attorney wisely. We're told, don't pick one just because you see their ad on TV. Find someone that's trustworthy and makes you feel comfortable. Starting with you, Kellie Warren, in 60 seconds or less, what can you say to our audience to make them comfortable you're the right choice to be their attorney?
School closings and business closings again. I have helped value them both on the ballot, and I have pushed back on the bureaucratic state and their overreach and made rulemaking and policymaking put it back with our elected officials. As an attorney with more than 25 years of experience, I have the breadth and depth to be the Attorney General, whether that's handling cases on land use, private property rights, pushing against China when they were sending contaminated heparin to the United States. I am best positioned to be the Attorney General, to lead and to defend the laws that we pass here in Kansas, and to stand up and fight and win against the Biden administration.
Tony Mattivi.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming. I am the only candidate in this race who has spent a career as a prosecutor. I've prosecuted cases in state court, federal court, and military court, cases ranging from speeding tickets to murders, drug cartels, Chinese spies, domestic terrorists who wanted to commit another Oklahoma City right here in Kansas, and a high-ranking member of Al-Qaeda who killed 17 American sailors in an attack on the USS Cole. The Kansas Attorney General is the chief law enforcement official of our state. The AG's office has 12 divisions, each of which touches in one way or another on investigation or prosecution or both. The Kansas Bureau of Investigation is a component of the AG's office. If you're okay with the chief law enforcement official of this state being a politician, there are two very capable people standing on the stage with me who fit that bill. But if you insist that your chief law enforcement official actually be a law enforcement official, I am the only candidate in the race who can say that.
Kris Kobach.
I decided to run for Attorney General the day that President Biden was sworn into office. On that first day, he issued a dozen executive orders that were either unconstitutional, in violation of federal law, or both. And because of the changes in standing doctrine over the last 20 years, the Attorney General is the official best positioned to fight back against an unconstitutional action in Washington. Some states are fighting back now, but it is almost always Texas who is leading the charge. If I'm your Attorney General, Kansas and Texas will be standing shoulder to shoulder. I have a great deal of experience in this area of complex civil litigation. I've already brought 4 lawsuits against administrations in D.C. The most recent two are in November. I represented North Dakota employers and employees suing to stop the OSHA vaccine mandate. We prevailed in the United States Supreme Court after our cases was consolidated with others on January 13th. And I'm currently representing 36 members of the Air Force who are suing to defend and enforce their religious freedom to say no to the mandate. In addition, over the past 20 years, I've been the lead attorney in more than a dozen federal lawsuits in courts across the land. When you hire an attorney, you hire the one with the right experience, which I have.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's talk about some issues. The next Attorney General, Tony Mattivi, may end up with the power to prosecute abortion crimes if the Kansas legislature bans the procedure. In your legal judgment, does that mean prosecuting only abortion providers or women who undergo the procedure and the carers and family members who help fund and help them?
The next Attorney General is the person who's going to be standing at the podium defending Value Them Both. When Value Them Both passes on August 2nd, I support it. I am pro-life. I am a conservative Catholic Republican. When Value Them Both passes on August 2nd, that's just the first step. The pro-abortion lobby, the abortion industry is going to file suit. Planned Parenthood is going to sue. The Center for Reproductive Rights exists to sue. It's our next Attorney General who will be standing at the podium defending that law. It's the Attorney General's job. It's part of what I believe in as a conservative Republican lawyer. Whether the law passes such that prosecutions take place of providers or individuals is up to the legislature, not the Attorney General. The Attorney General's job is not to legislate. It's not to legislate by litigation. It is to enforce the laws that are passed by the Kansas legislature.
Kris Kobach.
I will aggressively defend Value Them Both in any pro-life legislation, indeed all statutes that our Kansas legislature passes. Indeed, I just released a 5-point plan and talked about what we need to do to restore our pro-life laws that were cast into doubt and the one that was expressly overturned by the Kansas Supreme Court when it's made its erroneous decision. As to the specific question, who you prosecute, of course, depends on the statute. Very few statutes provide for the prosecution of the mother. Most provide for prosecution of the doctor or otherwise approach the problem. When we pass new pro-life legislation, after we pass the Value Them Both amendment on August 2nd, it is right. The ACLU and Planned Parenthood and other organizations will sue. I think I'm the only attorney up here which the ACLU uses in order to raise money. They say, please help us stop him in court. They know me. They know that I can beat them. And I intend to beat them when this litigation occurs. And you need someone who's got that experience.
Kellie Warren.
I am the only person on this stage who has done anything to put the pro-life Value Them Both amendment on your ballot. And it's because I fight and win tough elections and lead on conservative policy for Kansans in the legislature. Mr. Kobach likes to talk about his legal experience. Let's talk about that for a minute. He has lost in court to the ACLU when he was Secretary of State defending the state of Kansas. And when he lost, that cost the taxpayers $1.9 million in the award of attorney's fees that Kansas has to pay for Mr. Kobach losing that suit. And then that federal judge, that Republican-appointed judge, ordered Kris Kobach to take legal remedial education classes because he didn't know how to introduce a document into evidence. So I think, Joe Biden hasn't had a lot of good news lately, but him hearing that Kris Kobach wants to litigate against him, that might be the best news he's had in a long time. Thank you.
You each have an opportunity for rebuttal. Let's start with you, Kris Kobach, 30 seconds.
In that lawsuit, as Ms. Warren may not know, 42 U.S.C. 1988 allows the prevailing party in a civil rights case to get attorney's fees. However, it is not the winner in the district court that determines who gets fees. It's the winner in the Court of Appeals. My office did the district court. The Office of the Attorney General did the Court of Appeals. So no, it was not the party in the district court. And furthermore, even if you look at it that way, you should not blame the Attorney General. They drew a hostile panel in that case. No one should be blamed. When you have a hostile panel, you still argue the case in the hope that you can get it to the Supreme Court.
Your time is up. Tony.
When it comes to legal experience, I hope that everybody in this audience will go to Lexis and research the 3 candidates. What you will find when you do that is Tony Mattivi has 459 citations to his name. Kris Kobach has 187. Kellie Warren has 11. Not a single significant legal matter litigated.
You have the last chance to speak on this issue for 30 seconds, Kellie Warren.
Well, that shows why my opponents cannot be our Attorney General. They don't get the facts right. You don't need Mr. Mattivi's LexisNexis internet search skills to know that Kris Kobach loses elections and he loses in the courtroom. I have the breadth and depth of experience that is required in this office. It is a broad office. There are 12 divisions. And it's required of our office as Attorney General that we get it right, because it's a big policy-driven office. And I have the experience of looking at policy as a state elected official that we need for our next Attorney General.
Let's move on. It appears the U.S. Senate has reached a compromise on a new package to control gun violence. The state of Missouri has made it clear it will not allow local police departments to enforce new federal gun laws. If you're elected Attorney General Kris Kobach, would that be your legal opinion in Kansas?
The Attorney General absolutely has to step forward when the Second Amendment rights of the citizens of the state are infringed. This new legislation, in my view, is unconstitutional in probably 2 respects, if not more. I wrote the Kansas Second Amendment Protection Act in 2013, the critical sections of it. I wrote the sections of House Bill 2058 last year, which restores the rights of Kansas gun owners if there's an expungement of their prior crime to once again have the right to bear arms. And I hope all the attorneys here take note of that. Our expungement laws and the according laws restoring the rights of firearms owners are now stronger. And you can take note of that for your clients. I'm the only attorney on the stage who's actually defended on Second Amendment grounds the rights of a Kansas citizen to possess firearms. That experience is going to be critically important here. And of course, I taught Second Amendment law as a professor of constitutional law. I have the right background to do this.
Kellie Warren.
Well, it's important that we enforce the laws as written. And I have helped introduce legislation to protect the Second Amendment so that government contracts would not impinge and infringe on your Second Amendment rights if there were a retailer, wholesaler of firearms that was discriminating against the Second Amendment. And you know what? We couldn't advance that Second Amendment protection bill this session. Why? Because we have a liberal Democrat governor who would have vetoed it. And why do we have that Democrat governor? It's because Mr. Kobach lost this race in 2018 to the Democrat. This office is large, and it's important on the policy it leads on, whether it's energy, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, whether it's regulation. And you have to have the Attorney General who has the policy experience. I have that as a senator. I have to vote on all those policies and look at all those policies to lead this state in where we're going to go on these issues. So it's important we have the breadth and depth of legal experience that I have, as well as the policy decision-making experience as well.
Before we move on to Tony Mattivi, would you enforce those federal gun laws if they're passed by Congress?
Well, the first thing we need to do is determine if they're constitutional. And once we determine that, yes.
Thank you. Tony.
I, too, would challenge their constitutionality as a foundational issue. Look, one thing I agree with Senator Warren on, I don't think this is just about legal experience. I also think it's about life experience. And as the former paramedic who's standing up here on the stage, and my opponents can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe I'm the only person who's ever responded to a 911 call of a child having been shot. It's heartbreaking, okay? At the same time, you can be pro-Second Amendment and anti-mass murder. And I think as conservative Republicans, we have to be watchful and vigilant of folks who use tragedies like this to try to infringe on our constitutional rights. We have to be vigilant against that sort of overreach. So yes, I would challenge them on constitutional grounds. I, on the other hand, think it's okay to be pro-Second Amendment and anti-mass murder at the same time.
Our rules allow you 30 seconds to rebut, starting with you, Kris Kobach.
Regarding Ms. Warren's comment, the polls currently show me beating the Democrat in this race by a sizable margin. With regard to 2018, anybody who follows political history knows that 2018 was a bloodbath for Republicans. We lost 33 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives, one of the largest losses in U.S. history. In every single close governor's race except one, the Republican lost. That one was in Georgia with Brian Kemp. And yet we're to take election advice from somebody who has only won an election in a tiny district in Johnson County, and they think that qualifies them to run statewide. I've won 2 out of 3 of statewide candidates.
And you have a chance to respond, Kellie Warren.
He talked about an itty-bitty teeny Senate district. Well, guess what? I won my election. He lost his. And you know what? We've seen him lead in the polls before, Mr. Kobach, and then he loses on Election Day. And as conservative Republicans, we cannot afford to make that mistake again. We have to get it right in this Republican primary and nominate the conservative Republican who fights and wins.
Mr. Mattivi, you have the final word on this.
Electability is absolutely an issue. Part of the problems that we face as Republicans is that we have 2 Republican parties in Kansas right now. The electability issue that Secretary Kobach has is he has strong support among conservatives, but the moderate wing will jump over and vote for a Democratic, hand-picked, very Laura Kelly-esque AG candidate. What Senator Warren doesn't realize is she has the very same electability issue because she's trying to out-conservative the conservative, and at the same time, she attacks me for having a background that cuts across
that is your time.
lines.
I know you'll find a way of getting it in later. We received debate questions, by the way, from members of the Johnson County Bar Association and from Kansas City PBS viewers like Carla in Merriam. This question first goes to you, Kellie Warren. She asks, why is it permissible to ban people under 21 years of age from purchasing beer in Kansas, yet it is unlawful to ban those same people from owning a gun? Would you support reducing the drinking age to 18 so it matches the state's gun laws?
Gun laws are created and are looked at because we have a constitutional right to them in the Second Amendment. So it's a different issue, but we are kind of at a crossroads, if you will, where we allow some adults at 18 to do some things and some adults only at 21 to do them. When it comes to the Second Amendment as a constitutional right, we have to be vigilant and make sure that we don't backtrack and erode and infringe on those Second Amendment rights. If it's a policy that the legislature wants to look at, I would be there to lead with the colleagues that I have in the Senate and the House. I am the candidate and the person on this stage who has those relationships, who knows how that works, who knows how to get policy looked at, and who knows how to advance policy to enactment. So I would certainly have those conversations with our legislature and make sure, first of all, that we don't infringe on the Second Amendment and see what we can do to get them more aligned with 18-year-olds as well.
Thank you very much. Kris Kobach.
I don't think she answered the question, but I will. If you're 18 and you are required to go to war by your country, you are entitled to vote for your country, you should also be entitled to carry a firearm, and you should also be entitled to drink. And by the way, it wasn't the legislature of Kansas that changed the drinking age. It was in 1983, and it was the federal government that passed a law taking away 5% of highway funds from any state that didn't raise it to 21. Our legislature didn't choose that. Every state in the country folded. Even Hawaii. Do they have interstate highways? I don't think so. But the point is, we should not have folded. And if this issue comes up again, which it probably will if we assert our right as citizens of our state, I will fight, and I will try to overturn South Dakota versus Dole. It was a 6-3 decision challenging the highway funds deal back in 1983. I think with this Supreme Court, we can change it and bring the right back to the people of Kansas to decide what the right age is. That's the Federalist thing to do, and it's the right thing to do.
Tony Mattivi.
Drinking and carrying a firearm are very different things. There's a constitutional right to one, and there's not a constitutional right to the other. I caution you against falling into the trap of folks who are 18 and able to go off to war should have access unrestricted to firearms because the military restricts access to those firearms. I have a 22-year-old who's in the military. He's been in there for 4 years, and when he was 18 to 21 years old, the military did regulate his behavior and did regulate his access to firearms. All I'm cautioning against is falling prey to that argument because I think it's a false equivalency. As Republicans, we need to push back against infringement of all of our constitutional rights, including our Second Amendment rights, and I agree with the approach that bring all governance that you can back to the lowest level possible.
The rules allow you 30 seconds to rebut, but have you covered that, or do you want us to move on, Kellie Warren?
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate that. Sure, I'll make some additional comments. It is important that we defend our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. We see overreach from the Biden administration every day, whether it's regarding our education policy, whether it's regarding tax policy, and certainly regarding energy policy. We can see that at every gas station across the state of Kansas. And it's important that we as Republicans nominate the conservative Republican who can win. We cannot afford to be losing to the ACLU in court and costing taxpayers dollars. Thank you.
Kris Kobach.
Well, I told you that she didn't give an answer, and the second time around she didn't give an answer either. There are a lot of politicians who will not answer the tough questions because they don't want to be placed on the spot and they don't want to defend their position. I'm the only one up here who told you my position. Tony said there's a false equivalency. I think there's some merit in that argument. The point is, when you're 18 years old and you can vote and you can fight for this country, you should have all of the rights that other citizens enjoy. The bottom line is we have to have people who are willing to take a stand and have the ability to defend their position on the stand.
The last word goes to you, Tony Mattivi.
I am going to agree with the lack of accountability that sometimes takes place, and I'm going to, as a new candidate, express my frustration with that. I've never run for political office before, and one of the things that has truly amazed me about this process is that there are so many people who will stand on this stage and tell you what they think you want to hear and not what you need to know. And I submit to you that that is a very stark contrast between the one career prosecutor and experienced litigator in this race and the two career politicians.
Thank you very much. New topic. What % of the state attorney general's job should be devoted to enforcing immigration laws? And it starts with you, Tony.
Look, we need strong borders. There are people trying to come across our border every day who are trying to harm us and are trying to steal from us. How much of our time should be spent doing that, I think, depends on what else is going on in the office. If we have 5 capital murder cases in the state that the AG's office is trying to prosecute, and we're arguing with Nebraska over water rights at the same time, and we're filing a lawsuit against the federal government, immigration is probably going to take a lower priority. One of the things that concerns me about the race is that I have heard both of my opponents talk about sending Kansas law enforcement officers to the border to protect us from illegal immigration. I challenge them to find a law enforcement leader in this state who feels like they have enough resources in their community that they can send officers to the border and not keep their community or not make their community less safe. We have to be focused on protecting Kansans, keeping Kansans safe, and winning in litigation in court that affects Kansans.
How about you, Kellie Warren? What percentage of your time as Attorney General would you be spending enforcing immigration laws?
As Chief Legal Advocate of the state, I will be busy a lot. And one of the areas is border and looking at the immigration laws that we have. I have already done that as an elected state official. I have helped lead to passage a bill that would ban sanctuary cities in the state of Kansas. No local government could order their local law enforcement to stand down and not enforce federal immigration law. So as Attorney General, I will be taking a look at that. The percentage that you asked for, well, you know, if Biden would step up and do what his job is at the southern border, we wouldn't have to spend so much time here in the state of Kansas looking at that. So it's difficult to say. It depends. You know, the job would start in January and see where we are. We have a lot on our plate regarding government overreach that I have a record of standing and fighting against, standing up for our rights, and taking a look at immigration law too. So I would certainly make sure we enforce that new law. And a percentage, it's difficult to say. You can't predict at this time.
Did you have a percentage in mind, Kris Kobach?
Yeah, I think it's likely to be around 25%. The reason is some of our defense of state laws will be immigration related. Some of our offense on the Biden administration will be immigration related. I have already 2 federal cases that I have completed, or one still in process. I represented the 10 ICE agents who sued to stop the DACA amnesty of President Obama in 2012, and I'm currently representing 7 Texas counties and sheriffs in a similar immigration-related lawsuit in federal court. I've argued these issues in the 5th Circuit, 8th Circuit, 9th, 10th, and DC circuits. We also have to be willing to use state laws to address the problem of illegal immigration. The U.S. Supreme Court in Kansas versus Garcia opened the door to that and said, absolutely, if you want to enforce your laws against identity theft and the like, you can. I specifically will push the legislature to pass E-Verify, which other states have done, and I have helped those other states do. I'm asking Senator Warren if she'll support it. I doubt she will. And as far as her sanctuary city bill, we passed the most anemic, weak, toothless sanctuary city bill this past year in the legislature. I have written and argued for serious ones in the past, but the legislature has yet to pass them. I will continue to do so.
In your rebuttal, Tony Mattivi, would you like to increase the percentage of time you would spend now that Kris Kobach said 25%?
Well, is this Price is Right? No, I'm not going to increase it. Let me just point this out for context. The AG's office has 12 divisions: criminal litigation, civil litigation, consumer protection, crime victims compensation, fraud and abuse, Medicaid fraud and abuse, Medicaid Inspector General, Victim Services, Legal Opinions and Government Counsel, the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, the Administrative Division, and the Solicitor's Division. Any Attorney General who's paying attention to running that entire office, if he thinks he can spend 20% of his time on immigration,
that's the time you have. We're going to get back into this. Kellie Warren, your rebuttal.
Thank you. Regarding the sanctuary city bill that we worked with the Attorney General who brought that over to the legislature and the claim that it didn't go far enough. Well, you know what? We have a liberal Democrat governor who would have vetoed anything else. And why do we have that liberal Democrat governor who would have vetoed anything else? It's because of one person standing on this stage. And I'll give you a hint, it's not me. As far as in court, the last thing that Kansans need is Mr. Kobach standing at the podium defending the state of Kansas. He has lost doing that as Secretary of State.
Thank you. Kris Kobach, the final word to you.
Yeah, I asked her, would she support the E-Verify bill? Did you notice she dodged the question again? A simple yes or no could do. I'll tell you, she's not going to support it. E-Verify is the one state law across this country that has been successful in reducing illegal workforce in the labor market. She won't pass it because the people who write her checks won't let her vote in favor of it. As far as the sanctuary city bill and standing up in court, look, I have fought the ACLU probably more than anyone on this stage. You don't always win. In these highly charged cases, oftentimes the identity of the judge makes more difference than the quality of the argument. I think everyone in this room knows that.
Thank you very much. And we have a lot of judges in the room because we're with the Bar Association here at the DoubleTree Hotel. The next question goes to you first, Kris Kobach. You recently stated, by the way, that if elected Attorney General, you will, quote, wake up every morning having my breakfast, thinking about what our next lawsuit against Joe Biden is going to be. Which federal law, rule, or executive action would you seek to overturn first?
I can give you one that was passed, that was announced just a week and a half ago by the Biden administration. Hopefully some other attorney general will step forward and challenge it. But as you may have heard, Biden's Department of Agriculture announced that they were going to use federal school lunch monies and hold that hostage to any state that did not adopt trans-friendly bathrooms in their public schools. So no federal school lunch money. That is a huge point of leverage, and that takes that out of the hands of the state legislatures. I believe that is a violation. It is an accession of the federal spending power under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. We need to bring that lawsuit. I would love to bring that lawsuit. So that's one that I see right now. If it has not been brought when I become Attorney General, we'll bring it. Tony
Mattivi.
I can guarantee you that the one thing I will not, as Attorney General, wake up and have breakfast thinking about is how to sue Joe Biden. This office
How about lunch or dinner?
The 12 divisions in this office are far too important. Keeping Kansas safe is far too important. Making sure our sheriffs and our law enforcement officials have the resources that they need to keep us safe and dig out of COVID is far too important. If you wanted to ask me about one thing I would push back on the Biden administration about, it would be the eviction moratorium. As a small business owner and a landlord, I was as frustrated as everybody else in America when the president said, you may not kick out a deadbeat tenant even if you depend on that income to feed your family, and then admitted in the same breath that he didn't have the authority to do that. I would absolutely be willing to push back on that, but what I'm going to wake up thinking about is how we keep Kansans safe.
Kellie Warren.
Well, we need to remind Kansans when Mr. Kobach talks about what he wakes up and wants to do, that his record is that he wakes up and he loses to a Democrat in his U.S. congressional race. He wakes up and loses his state Senate race. He wakes up and loses his governor's race, and he wakes up and loses his U.S. Senate race. So as Republicans, we cannot afford to nominate a Republican who loses to Democrats. As far as what policy I would take a look at, you might have heard the U.S. Attorney General, along with the EPA, created the Office of Environmental Justice. That's just about more control over how we run our businesses, how we use our land here in Kansas. And it's just, again, an overreach of the federal government. I am the person on this stage who has experience getting laws enacted for you, for Kansans, pushing back against the Biden administration. In special session, we got enacted a bill that if you didn't want to have to take the federally government-mandated COVID-19 vaccine in order to keep your job, you didn't have to. And I got that done. They can talk the talk, but I walk the walk.
Thank you very much. Kris Kobach, 30 seconds to rebut.
I don't think you do walk the walk. Once again, you failed to answer the question. You said, I don't like the Office of Environmental Justice. That's not a policy. That's not a regulation. You failed to give us a statute or a regulation that you would challenge. There are only 2 attorneys on this stage who have ever been in federal court. One has never argued a case in federal court. You need to have that experience. You need to know what you can achieve and what you cannot achieve. Sometimes the court you're in may define the limits of what you can achieve, but you must not be afraid to go to court, and you must know the issues to be able to do it competently.
Tony Mattivi.
I will lean back and let these 2 slug it out over legislative issues. Just to point out the difference between me and them is in that I am not going to the Attorney General's office to legislate. I'm not going there to litigate into legislation. I'm going there to run the Attorney General's office, the entire Attorney General's office, to help keep our state safe and to win in litigation when we can't resolve cases against our neighbors.
And the final word goes to you, Kellie Warren.
Well, once again, it's why Mr. Kobach cannot be our nominee. He gets the facts wrong. Just yesterday, as a matter of fact, our Attorney General pushed back against Biden and his energy policy and wanting to change rules and regulations. That's part of the Attorney General's job as well. Look at policy and stand up and fight against it. And he's wrong again, too. I have been in federal court. So we have to make sure that we have a competent legal attorney who doesn't get sanctioned by federal courts, which I sure never have been sanctioned by a federal court. And we have to make sure that we choose as our nominee the one who can win.
Thank you very much. And as you point out, the current Attorney General, Derek Schmidt, now running for governor. Thank you, Derek Schmidt. He's coming into us via Zoom, trying to communicate with us. But he's now in a different race. This is one of you, or a Democrat this fall, is going to be elected Attorney General. But Kellie Warren, if you had been Kansas Attorney General at the time, would you have joined the Texas lawsuit challenging the 2020 presidential election as current Attorney General Derek Schmidt did?
You know, there were a lot of things to look at in that 2020 election. We needed to look at, there were states that didn't have the election security that we do have here in Kansas. We saw that in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Michigan. And as an elected statewide level official that I have been in the legislature, we have helped secure our elections and make sure that we don't have the huge amount of ballot harvesting that some other states saw. So it's important to enact these types of policies to keep our democracy strong. Whether I would join that lawsuit, it was a difficult lawsuit, and the arguments were to be made, and it was something to look at. And if I were Kansas Attorney General, I think I would have joined that as well. Our Attorney General chose that that was the right policy to follow, and his experience as a senator has served him well in that role in choosing to join that lawsuit.
What about you, Mr. Mattivi?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, with a qualifier. Look, I'm not running to be the Attorney General of Texas, and protecting the rights of the citizens of Texas is not my job as the Kansas Attorney General. Whether I would join that lawsuit or not would have been based on what impact it has on Kansas and whether it protects Kansans for us to be involved. I've looked at it. I agree with Derek. I think it was the right decision.
Kris Kobach.
I drafted that lawsuit. That lawsuit was written by 5 attorneys, of which I was one. We then circulated it among Republican attorneys general. Only one attorney general, Ken Paxton of Texas, took that lawsuit and ran with it. Kansas did not join Texas in the suit. Kansas and a few other states came in a day later and said, oh, me too, we'd like to file an amicus brief. There was only one state that moved forward. And I don't think my opponents actually know what the suit was about. It was about the provision in Article 2 of the Constitution that says only the state legislature can make amendments to how you select presidential electors. 4 of the states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, and Wisconsin, made non-legislative changes to how their presidential electors were reselected. The suit was not about fraud. The suit was about unconstitutional changes to how you select electors. The case went straight to the Supreme Court. Rush Limbaugh spent the entire program talking about it the day we announced it. Some states came in a day later. But the question is, do you have the ability to draft that suit? Do you know what it actually means? And do you have the courage to take it to court?
Thank you. Kellie Warren.
Well, it's interesting to know that Mr. Kobach drafted the lawsuit. The lawsuit eventually was unsuccessful in court, which is, again, another reason why we need to make sure that we nominate the Attorney General candidate from the Republican Party who has the legal experience and the policy-making experience to get things done. It's an important office. You're the chief legal advocate for the state. Part of the job is assisting our counties in criminal prosecution, and the rest is also very important too.
Your 30-second rebuttal, Tony?
It won't take that long. Look, my decisions as Attorney General are not going to be made based on what gets me on Rush Limbaugh or what gets me on Fox News. They're going to be based on what's best for the state of Kansas.
Thank you. Kris Kobach.
Yeah, unsuccessful in court. 2 justices of the Supreme Court said we must take the case according to the Constitution, Article 3. The other 7, in a per curiam opinion, simply said Texas doesn't have standing. Of course Texas had standing. But more importantly, what is she saying? She's saying if there's a chance you may lose in court, don't take the suit. Well, I will always take the suit, whether it's defending Kansas laws or defending our constitutional rights. I will not be an Attorney General like her who decides whether she has a chance of winning or not. If it is right and if it is constitutional, you go to court.
Thank you very much. We know we've talked about a lot of hot-button issues here, but there's a lot to this office called Attorney General in Kansas. Starting with you, Tony, we're told from national polls that rising prices is the #1 concern on Americans' minds this election year, with a large consumer protection division in the AG's office. What would you do to make sure Kansas residents are not being taken advantage of at the gas pump, grocery store, and from in-person and online service providers?
Consumer protection is a huge part of what the Attorney General does, and that's one of the reasons I'm unwilling to say that immigration would make up such a large percentage of what the AG does. Right now, the citizens are scared. People are paying too much money for goods that weren't costing us very much just a few months ago or weeks ago. The Attorney General has a role with regard to consumer protection, making sure that cases that are brought to him or her are prosecuted appropriately and protecting Kansas consumers. It's a big part of the job, and I plan to spend as much time on it as necessary.
Kris Kobach.
Absolutely, consumer protection is a huge responsibility, and it will not diminish one iota when I'm Attorney General. However, we have to remember, the reason everything is more expensive right now has nothing to do with the Ukraine. It has everything to do with the restriction on the production of fossil fuels. The price of gas going up causes everything else to go up. And there is a role for state attorneys general to play, and it is a litigation role. Texas, for example, brought one of the lawsuits on the restriction of drilling on federal lands. I believe it was West Virginia that brought, or maybe Louisiana, that brought the lawsuit on the Keystone XL pipeline being shut down. Both of those were contrary to federal statute. I believe that this administration, after they lose in November, is going to be even more bent on taking down the use of fossil fuels in America. They're already threatening to make the prairie chicken back on the threatened species list. Why does that matter? Because that stops drilling in western Kansas. I will be vigilant and will do everything within my power to ensure that we exploit our fossil fuels in a responsible way and we drive down prices.
Kellie Warren.
The Consumer Protection Division of the Office of Attorney General has a big role to play. And I have helped that division as well as a state attorney and State Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman. I have enacted laws that would help protect our consumers here in Kansas, whether it's deceptive advertising that we see that often leads our most elderly Kansans to stop taking their prescription medications or stop using that medical device that their doctor has prescribed because they see a deceptive ad on TV, or whether it's looking at the pharmacy benefits managers across the state, and there are some unscrupulous actors in that regard, and we helped pass law that would help make sure that we keep our pharmacy prices in check as well. So as the chief legal advocate of the state, it's important to have this policy experience. In my 25 years as a legal practicing attorney, I have experience defending Kansans like you on their Consumer Protection Act cases as well.
You have 30 seconds to respond, Tony.
This is another example of politicians telling you what you want to hear instead of what you need to know. Both of my opponents have advocated for creating a new division within the AG's office dedicated to affirmative lawsuits against the Biden administration. Unless they are at the same time proposing tax increases, which I would never favor as a conservative Republican, they are by necessity, by math, they're taking resources away from the other divisions in the office, including not just criminal, but consumer protection as well.
Mr. Kobach.
I'm going to use this rebuttal to rebut something Ms. Warren said earlier. She said she does have experience in federal court. She just told you that she has experience arguing cases, I guess, in federal court. In April, she told the Douglas County Republican Party that she had not ever argued a case in federal court. We have that on tape. So either she's lying to them or she's lying to you. And I'll agree, Tony. She's telling the audience what they want to hear. But I want to know which one of those is right. And if you have argued the case, what's the name of the case, please?
And you have the last chance to respond to that.
Thank you. Mr. Mattivi tells you that don't just listen, don't just tell us what we want to hear, but what you need to know. He calls himself a conservative Republican, but he has no record of supporting conservative policies. The record that he does have is he asks campaign fundraising to be done by persons who vote no on Value Them Both, and persons who are Republicans, but they support the Democrat for U.S. Senate over Roger Marshall, and they support Democrat Laura Kellie, who is now running for her second time for governor.
Thank you so much. 20 state attorneys, 20 state attorney generals recently wrote a letter to the Education Department in Washington saying they oppose teaching critical race theory in classrooms. Kris Kobach, what role, if any, should the Kansas Attorney General play in classroom instruction in districts governed by locally elected school boards?
Well, the role of the Attorney General in that particular instance would be if the federal government imposed some sort of mandate, probably using leverage from the Department of Education monies or school lunch monies to try to force, blackmail, coerce school districts into teaching it. So it is not the responsibility of the Attorney General to say, you know, CRT is going to be stopped in Kansas because I want it to be. The question is, you defend the right of the state legislature, which I think should restrict CRT in our classes. That is not an accurate view of American history, and we have so many people who are trying to push ideological content into our schools. Our schools should not teach people to be conservative or to be liberal. Our schools should teach people history, accurate history, and reading, writing, and arithmetic. This does not belong in our schools. So if I play a role, it will be in defending against any federal action that tries to mandate it in Kansas schools.
Ms. Warren.
Yes, the Office of Attorney General does have a role to play in fighting against critical race theory. It's indoctrination of our children. As a mother of 4, 3 of them young enough to still be in K-12 schools, I see it every day, and we have to be vigilant against it. As a state senator and chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, I am the person on this stage who has actually had to vote on that and try to get that passed. Again, it was vetoed by the governor, and we could not get protection for our school children against critical race theory in Kansas because we have a 2018 loss as Republicans to a Democrat governor. So it's important that we nominate the person who can win in November. As far as critical race theory, it's, you know, we need to look at it. We need to stop that, and I would lead the legislature to passage of that critical race theory ban that we were looking at in the state legislature. And you know what? Not all Republicans voted for that. So the type of Republican you select to be your nominee matters. Not what conservative Republican who loses or just someone who tells you they're conservative Republican, but you don't know.
Thank you. Tony Mattivi.
So look, personally, I'm opposed to the idea of critical race theory, but I'm not running for Attorney General to further my personal political agenda. I'm running for Attorney General to represent the citizens of the state of Kansas. I'm not going in there to be an ideologue, but I am going in there to protect the constitutional rights of our citizens. And I agree that that's the way you go after an issue like that. But let me use this time to address something that Senator Warren said. Senator Warren has the same electability issue that she criticizes Secretary Kobach for. And the reason for that is she is trying to out-conservative the conservative in the race. I am an unapologetic conservative, but at the same time, I have the resume and I have the background that cuts across ideologues and ideological guidelines, and it draws support from conservatives, it draws support from moderates, it'll even draw support from the other side when we get to the general election. I am the one candidate on this race who can run well against a hand-picked Democratic AG candidate in a way that neither of my opponents can.
Kris Kobach, your 30-second rebuttal.
More than just urging people to stop critical race theory, I have actually drafted a bill personally myself with my own keyboard, and that bill is found at the Alliance for Free Citizens website. Portions of that bill were incorporated into a bill that was in the Kansas legislature this year. You have to know, I taught legislation in law school, and many of you know that, you have to know how to write legislation in a way that can stand up in court. I have done that, and so we will push an anti-CRT bill, and I will make sure that it stands up in court.
Thank you very much. Kellie Warren.
Again, it's one thing to talk the talk, but you have to walk the walk. I have been an elected official representing Kansans and the policies they care about and have a voting record on this issue. It's not about writing something, it's about actually getting it enacted so it impacts Kansans in a positive way that will help Kansans live their lives more freely. And you can see that my opponents are attacking me. It's because I feel that they're desperate because they know that I'm the conservative who has the legal experience and the policy-making experience to win.
Thank you very much. Tony Mattivi.
Let me just say one thing before somebody attacks my conservative credentials. I would challenge anybody on this stage to demonstrate their conservative credentials by volunteering to leave their country and leave their family behind and go to a war zone to protect us and our ideals. And until somebody else can stand up and talk about having done that, frankly, I don't have much patience for somebody challenging my conservative credentials.
According to the latest voter registration numbers, Republicans make up 44% of Kansas voters. That means to win this race, you'll need to attract at least some independents and Democrats. Starting with you, Kellie Warren, what is your message to people watching who aren't Republicans?
My message is this: I win tough elections. I have been asked by Kansans to run for office against incumbents in a very politically purple district, kind of like the color of my dress. And for a conservative Republican to get out there and defeat that incumbent in the primary and then to win in the general, that takes political courage, and that's what I have. And then I was asked to run for the Senate, be a bigger conservative voice in our legislature. Again, we had an incumbent who didn't represent our conservative values, And I ran against him, and defeated the Democrat as well. So I would ask independents in the general election to join and support me, because I win tough elections. And then when I win, what do? It matters to you, because we get laws enacted and policy that matters to you. As Attorney General, I would do the same thing. Not all Attorneys General step up and stand up against critical race theory. Not all of them challenge the Biden administration on energy policy. Not all of them have the same position on the Second Amendment.
Thank you very much. Kris Kobach, you're going to need at least some support from independents and Democrats. What's your message to them watching now?
My message to them is I will aggressively defend all Kansas laws, even Kansas laws that I might not have voted for, because that is ultimately the duty of the Attorney General. The duty of and it is not a duty that is going to be forced upon the Attorney General. Some Attorneys General do not defend. I will not put my finger to the wind. I will not try to assess, oh boy, are we going to win in front of that judge? Will we win in this particular court? I will defend all of them. And the reason you defend, even if you believe you are likely to lose at the district court level, is because then you can get the facts on the record and then bring that case on appeal. And hopefully, if it's a federal issue, you can get to the United States Supreme Court. You have to defend even laws that you do not agree with, and I will do that.
Tony Mattivi.
The Democrats have found a candidate for Attorney General who is, in my opinion, very Laura Kelly-esque. And I am a Republican. I'm not just running as a Republican, but the Democrats are going to make an argument in the general election to elect an outsider, to elect a prosecutor and not a politician. Chris Mann is an exceptionally nice guy. I like him, but his resume is minor league ball. I am the Republican conservative Kansan who runs best against the Democrat. I am the outsider, I am the prosecutor and not the politician, and my resume shows that I played in the majors for 25 years. I am the candidate on this stage who can most easily beat the hand-picked Democrat.
You have 30 seconds to rebut Kellie Warren.
Yes, I think he knows an awful lot about the Democrat, doesn't he? So just goes to show that it's important that we pick the conservative Republican that has the record that you can look at and trust. I am that conservative Republican. You can look at my record. You don't have to guess whether I support the Parents' Bill of Rights, whether I support a ban on mask mandates by government, a ban on vaccine passports by government. You can look at my record, and that's what's important to Kansans of all political stripes, that you have someone you can trust, their record you can look at.
Thank you so
and
much,
they will
Kris
win.
Kobach.
Well, I can offer you proof that I can reach out to them. I've been in 3 statewide general elections, and I've won 2 out of 3. And in those 2, my vote total was either the highest or the second highest in the state. So obviously, I can reach out to those who are not Republicans. Also, I would say this. The Republican Party in Kansas suffers one problem that is a chronic one. We have bruising primaries where we bloody each other and run ads that are false. You don't see me doing that, but I've been the victim of that. We need to be more truthful and more building up of our credentials.
Thank you. Tony Mattivi, the last word to you.
If Senator Warren thinks that she can run a primary where she campaigns as being the most conservative in the race and attacks her opponents for receiving support across the ideological lines, I think she's misleading both herself and you by saying that she can get elected in the general.
Being Attorney General is about priorities, so congratulations, Tony Mattivi. You've just been named the next Kansas Attorney General. You just walk in your new office in Topeka, and the first big priority you will tackle when you sit down at your desk is blank.
There are 3. The way that we deal with fentanyl in this case, in this state, is not solving the problem. Fentanyl is more a weapon of mass destruction than it is a drug, and we need to treat it as such. Secondly, it's unconscionable that our state continues to pay to house inmates who've been on death row for decades. I will personally begin pushing those cases back through the system. And then finally, I will help protect Kansans from the theft of intellectual property by foreign actors. As a federal prosecutor, that's something that I saw firsthand. At the time I retired, was supervising 30 open investigations, adverse foreign actors here in this state stealing intellectual property from our businesses, our agricultural community, and our academic institutions. I know that there is a huge gap between what Kansans can do to protect themselves and what the federal government can do to protect them. I know how to fill that gap, and that would be my 3rd priority on the day I take office as Attorney General.
There was a huge mistake, and it was actually Kellie Warren who was elected Attorney General, and she just walked into the office, took her seat, and her big priority now is blank.
Well, Nick, first of all, that's no big mistake. So it's leadership. The office requires leadership. You have to have the leader who has both led in private practice and led the state of Kansas to get policy done that you care about. I am that person on this stage who has done that. My first priority would be defending Value Them Both. I believe Value Them Both will pass on the August 2nd primary, and you can rest assured the ACLU is ready with their lawsuit to challenge it. And let's remember who on this stage has lost to the ACLU and required Kansans taxpayers to pay $1.9 million to who? To the ACLU. What's the ACLU going to do? Use that $1.9 million from Kansans to turn around and sue Kansas on Value Them Both when Value Them Both passes. So I will be the Attorney General, just like I was fighting against the two very pro-abortion incumbents I defeated and got Value Them Both through the legislature after I won.
Thank you
and
very
will defend
much.
it in
Actually, it was a
court.
Steve Harvey's big epic mistake, actually. Wrong name mentioned. It was you, Kris. You are now heading into Topeka in the Attorney General's office. Priority number one?
I'll give you 5. Priority number 1 is a special litigation division, which we will set up similar to Texas's to bring these lawsuits. Number 2, Value Them Both. It's not just I will support Value Them Both. You have to do affirmative things, like seek declaratory judgments on statutes that are in question, issue Attorney General opinions where that's necessary. Third thing I will do, I'll make concealed carry licenses free in Kansas. You shouldn't have to pay to exercise a constitutional right. You don't have to pay to be on this stage. You don't have to pay to go to church. You shouldn't have to have a license from the state for CCL. You still have to go through the requirements, but not have to pay for it. 4, election fraud cases. I wrote the law in 2015 that gives not just the Secretary of State, but also the Attorney General of Kansas the authority to bring election fraud cases. There is still a double voting problem in the state of Kansas where people vote in multiple states in the same election. And then number 5, consumer protection. There are new ways that fraudsters are preying on consumers, especially the elderly, using text messages and fake websites. We will proactively go after them.
Thank you very much. Tony, in your rebuttal, would you like to add 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10?
No. Let me just say the Special Litigation Division is something that is advocated by both of my opponents. It is a phenomenally bad idea. We don't need it. I will file the lawsuits that need to be filed, and in 4 years, when a Republican gets elected, we won't have to dismantle the infrastructure that we built to get us through the next 2 years.
Kellie Warren.
I think it's critically important that Kansas Republicans select the nominee that can fight and win. And that means first we have to win November. We can't have an Attorney General who's going to be a Republican unless we win November. And then when we have that Republican Attorney General, we have to make sure it's an attorney who doesn't lose when they represent the state of Kansas in court on that election fraud bill that Mr. Kobach, as Secretary of State, lost in court, again, to the ACLU. So I know Kansans remember this, and I know Kansans also remember that he was ordered by that federal judge to take remedial education.
Thank you very much indeed. You can mention that in your closing statement, but Kris Kobach, the final word on this to you.
Yeah, I'd like to correct that false statement that she made once again. Under federal law, if the state loses, it doesn't matter who wins in the district court. Before this case was taken, the Attorney General and I agreed that my office would handle the district court. Since we were familiar with the facts, they would do the appeal. We both lost. But even if we had won in the district court, when you lose on appeal, the ACLU gets all of its fees. You can look it up, 42 U.S.C. 1988. That is how it works. So to say that our loss in district court was responsible for the ultimate assessment of fees is incorrect. And the attorney who did argue on appeal is a great one.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Kris Kobach. Now it's time for our candidates to make their final case to the voters. They have 60 seconds to do so, and it starts with you, Kris Kobach.
In my opening, I talked about going on the offense, and the second most important job, generally speaking, is, of course, playing defense against attack. And this is particularly true with respect to the right to life. When Value Them Both passes, as I believe it will on August 2nd, we are going to be going back to court on abortion-related issues. I have the experience of arguing in all of those different circuits against the ACLU. Now, she says he's lost a case to the ACLU, of course, and I've beaten the ACLU too. Just because you have one loss against an organization that brings highly politicized cases, and these highly politicized cases, everybody knows, tend to depend more on the temperament of the judge than on the actual issues presented in the briefs. But her approach would apparently be, decide if you can win. If you can't win, don't defend the law. That is irresponsible, and that is no way to defend our Constitution. It is also something that someone who has no experience in federal court would choose. She still hasn't given us the name of that case. I assume she's lying today, not in April.
Kellie Warren, early voting is going to start in a few weeks. What's your last word to voters?
Sure, my opponents continue to attack me because they know I have the record of fighting and winning that matters to Kansans. As a senator, I became a senator because I challenged an incumbent in my own party. Now, that's not a person who just thinks, let's take on a challenge, only if we can win it. I fight the big fight, and I win. Both times I won in very purple, politically, Johnson County. So you know I have the record that you can look at and trust. And I'm not just saying I'm a conservative Republican. I don't have campaign events that are fundraised by people who vote no on Value Them Both, who support Democrats over our Republican candidate for U.S. Senate, and who support Democrats over our candidate for governor. So both of my opponents don't have the record that I do of fighting and winning. And we need to have the AG who's the best positioned to defend the laws passed here in Kansas and to fight and win against the Biden administration. I am that Republican, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
And the final word goes to you, Tony Mattivi.
And that record is why she cannot win in the general. Look, this race is a sharp contrast between two career politicians versus the career prosecutor. Especially right now, the Attorney General's office is incredibly important. The violent crime rate is rising, the murder rate has skyrocketed, our communities are becoming less safe. The AG's office is not a political springboard, and it is not a consolation prize. Kansas does not need another career politician. Kansas needs an AG who will fight crime, who will win litigation, who has proven that they can win litigation, who can win in November, and who will keep our communities safe and our businesses thriving. I am the candidate who can deliver on those promises starting day one. Thank you, Nick.
And you have been watching the Kansas Republican Attorney General in Kansas, the candidates Kris Kobach, Tony Mattivi, and Kellie Warren. Thank you so much for being with us. As was already pointed out during this debate, whoever wins will take on Democrat Chris Mann, a former police officer and local prosecutor in Wyandotte County this fall, but by and large, this office has been held in Republican hands for most of its history. I'm Nick Haynes. From all of us here at Kansas City PBS, from the DoubleTree Hotel and our debate sponsors, the Johnson County Bar Association, be well, keep calm, and carry on.
The Kansas Attorney General's debate on Kansas City PBS has been presented by the Johnson County Bar Association. 1,400 attorney members serving the community since 1938.